In June 1918, a steamer called the Macumbo struck a submerged rock off Ned's Beach at the northern end of Lord Howe Island and stuck fast. To lighten her enough to float her off, the crew put the cargo over the side. She was carrying bananas. Black rats came ashore with the fruit. Within about 2 years, they were across the whole island, and within 10, 5 kinds of bird that existed nowhere else on Earth were gone. So the islanders sent for owls. 101 years later, Australia dropped 47 tons of poison out of a helicopter onto the same island, and one of the animals it had been decided in advance to get rid of was the owl. I'm Arthur Beckett. I would have signed the order for those owls in 1922, and so, I suspect, would you. Lord Howe is a crescent of volcanic rock in the Tasman Sea, 600 kilometers off the coast of New South Wales. 1,455 hectares, a mountain at the southern end, a settlement at the northern. It is the kind of island that makes animals found nowhere else, and it made a great many of them. The rats did not arrive at a pristine place, and that belongs on the record before anything else. House mice had been ashore since about 1860. There were cats, pigs and goats. At least 3 endemic birds were already gone before a rat ever set foot on it. A white swamphen shot out before 1834, a pigeon last seen in 1853, a parakeet last recorded in 1869. The rats landed on a place that had already been worked over. What happened after 1918 was of a different order. By 1920, the Island Board of Control was urging people to kill rats. Later surveys recorded densities of up to 94 rats per hectare. And the birds went out one after another. The Lord Howe starling by 1919, the robust white-eye by 1923, the fantail with no records after 1924, the thrush within about 6 years of the ship, and last of all, the Lord Howe gerygone, a small warbler not seen alive after 1928. Alongside them, the management plans list at least 13 endemic invertebrates and 2 plants, 2 land snails and 11 beetles. That at least is doing real work. It is a figure from a government file, not a completed audit. Now consider what the islanders were actually looking at, because I want you to arrive at their answer before I tell you it was wrong. You are 600 kilometers offshore. Poison has to come by ship, and every sack of it you lay has to be laid again next season, and the season after that forever, by people you have to pay. Traps have to be walked. Terriers have to be fed. Every method available to a small island community in 1922 costs money every year and stops working the day the money stops. A predator does not. A predator arrives once, feeds itself, breeds and spreads out across ground you cannot walk. It hunts at night, which is when rats move. It hunts by sound in dense forest, where a man with a lamp is useless. It has no interest in your crops, and it will not need shipping in again. On paper, it is not a bad idea. On paper, it is the only idea that scales. And there was a specific animal that fitted. Masked owls take rats as a matter of course in Australia. They are built for exactly this prey, at exactly this size, at exactly this hour. So between December 1922 and October 1930, roughly 100 owls were released on Lord Howe. Masked owls, mostly Tasmanian stock. Barn owls too, Australian, and if the account is right, American ones shipped across the Pacific. Booboks from near Sydney. I cannot tell you who authorized it, because no name and no instrument survives in anything I can reach, and I cannot break the 100 down by shipment, because it is one number from one island natural history, published in 1991. Say about 100 owls over 8 years, and claim no more precision than that. It did not work. The barn owls died out. The masked owls established, bred and stayed, and so did the rats. 70 years on, the island was still carrying rat densities that would have been familiar to the men who opened the crates. Across the 3 decades to the 2000s, more than 130 tons of poison went onto Lord Howe, at a cost of over $2 million Australian dollars, and never removed them. You cannot eke your way through an animal that breeds faster than you can hunt it. 100 owls against an island of rats was never going to be anything else. And then the story stops behaving. The version in circulation is that the owls ignored the rats and ate the native birds instead. The standard biological control disaster, the mongoose and the pit viper all over again. It is a good story, and it is not what the only evidence anybody has ever gathered says. That evidence is a single pellet analysis carried out on the island by David Millage, built on point surveys and on radio tracking 2 female owls for 14 months. Black rats appeared in 72% of intact pellets. House mice in 28, Seabirds in 21. Endemic land birds did not appear at all. I have to be careful with that last sentence, and so should you. Seabirds are native birds, and 1 pellet in 5 had one in it. The narrow claim is the true one. The owls were not eating the 4 or 5 endemic land birds still clinging on. They were eating rats and mice and a great many petrels. Millage does not report how many intact pellets he had, and I would like to know, because a percentage without a denominator is exactly the sort of number this channel exists to take apart. But a century after they were released to eat rats, the owls were eating rats. They were doing it at 20 to 30 pairs on that island, roughly 10 times the density masked owls reach anywhere in their natural range, because Lord Howe had become a rat farm and they were living on the yield. Millage's reading is that the introduction may have slowed the loss of the remaining endemic land birds, and that by the 2000s, the owls were functioning as the island's apex predator and holding the rats down. I have watched enough monitoring programs to be wary of a reversal this tidy, but the pellets are the pellets. The failure of 1922 was not that the owls turned on the natives, it was that 100 owls were never going to be enough, and then they stayed 100 years and became part of the machinery, which is what made the next decision so strange. In 2019, the Lord Howe Island board did the thing that had been argued about for a decade. 47 tons of Brodifacoum bait were broadcast by helicopter over 85% of the island's land area in June and July, across 76 hours of flight time. In the settlement, where you cannot drop poison out of the sky onto people's houses, they built a grid instead, nearly 19,000 bait stations outside and about 3,500 inside on a 10-meter spacing, plus 9,500 hand broadcast points and 230 roof spaces opened up and baited. 63 islanders worked on it, more than a fifth of the working-age population. 121 of the 125 leaseholders signed agreements letting strangers into their houses with poison. You will read that this was to kill 210,000 rats. In fairness, a planning figure for an operation like this is meant to be an upper bound. You bait for the worst case, because underbaiting is precisely how eradications fail. But across 1,455 hectares, that number implies 144 rats per hectare, against a maximum ever recorded on the island of 94, and against the 8 to 10 per hectare the field team measured in the settlement while they were working, 14 to 18 times the density they were standing in. It was a deliberately conservative operational assumption, and it has been quoted ever since as a body count. And the owls had already been dealt with. The logic is the coldest thing here, and it is also unarguable. 20 to 30 pairs of masked owls were living on a rat population about to be deleted. Take the rats away, and the owls do not politely starve. They switch to what is left, the endemic land birds that survived a century of rats, and the seabirds breeding on that island in enormous numbers. The predator brought in to fix 1918 would have gone straight through what 1918 had spared, so the decision was taken to remove a species that is itself listed as threatened in New South Wales. It was not carried out the way it was planned. 28 masked owls died, and the bait got most of them first. 11 confirmed by post-mortem as poisoned, 11 more suspected but too far gone to confirm, and 6 shot across the 18 months afterwards. The last one was seen in November 2021. What was designed as a controlled removal became, in practice, the same poison drop finishing a job the shooters were supposed to do. It was not only the owls. 49 buff-banded rails were recovered dead, all in the settlement. 4 Lord Howe currawongs confirmed, and 2 more suspected. 2 purple swampfins, 2 silver eyes, a golden whistler, 233 woodhens and 129 currawongs were caught beforehand and held in aviaries for the duration to keep them out of it. 5 woodhens and 3 currawongs died in there. I have seen what holding wild birds through a season does. Not to the birds, to the people. You lose them to stress, and to aspergillosis, and to something as ordinary as a bird refusing to eat. And by about week 6, somebody on every crew starts saying out loud that the aviary is killing more of them than the poison would have. They are usually wrong. They are never certainly wrong, and nobody who has stood in front of a dead rail in a keeping cage forgets it. There is a detail in that operation I keep returning to. The estimate for the woodhen population before the eradication was 221 birds. They caught 233. They set out to round up every woodhen on the island, and found more than they believed existed, which ought to make anybody cautious about every population figure in this story, including the ones I have given you. What came back is the reason any of it happened. The Lord Howe woodhen, down to about 9 breeding pairs in the 1970s, was surveyed in December 2024 at more than 1,500 adults and juveniles. Black-winged petrel breeding success went from 2.5% to over half. A wood-feeding cockroach nobody had seen on the main island in over 80 years turned up in 2022. A land snail last collected in 1913 was recorded again. Another was seen alive for the first time ever. If this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. I only make these when the record actually supports them. We have been importing animals to fix animals for a long time. The case that ought to be famous is a taro patch on Oahu. In April 1932, an entomologist named C.E. Pemberton, working for the Hawaiian Sugar Planters Association, brought 149 cane toads back from Puerto Rico to eat cane beetles. Most went into a taro patch beside a substation at Waipio, and Waipio became a factory. Between August 1933 and July 1935, Hawaii moved at least 633,000 toads across 5 islands, and more than half of them were never recorded as arriving anywhere. Then, on the 1st of June 1935, 102 toads were collected on Oahu and shipped to Queensland. One died on the way. Everything Australia has spent on cane toads since comes out of that taro patch, and there is no published assessment, then or now, of whether the Hawaiian toads ever reduced cane beetle damage at all. Hawaii did it again in 1955 with a snail, releasing the rosy wolf snail on Oahu to hunt the giant African land snail. That predator was then introduced 60 separate times, across about 27 island groups, by agency after agency, each acting after the last had already failed. It is now held responsible for 134 land snail extinctions. Of the 51 Partula species of the Society Islands, at least 29 are gone, and 10 survive only in captive breeding rooms. Guam got its problem by accident, and it shows how far down these things reach. A brown tree snake came out of the Admiralty Islands in salvage cargo after the war. 1 shipment, 1 founding event, confirmed by DNA. 12 of the island's 22 native birds were extirpated as breeding residents. Then the measurements started arriving from the layer below. Wet season spiderwebs on Guam run at 18.4 per 10 meters against 0.45 on neighboring islands that still have birds. 40 times as many. Seeds of one forest tree that were carried 5 meters from the parent now travel 73 centimeters because there is nothing left to carry them. The current fix is dead mice with paper streamers and 80 milligrams of paracetamol in them, dropped from helicopters. It kills 59% of small snakes and 14% of large ones, which means it works worst on exactly the animals big enough to eat a bird. And in the sub-Antarctic, Macquarie Island, where Australia spread 305 tons of the same poison used on Lord Howe and recovered 2,424 dead native birds, including 693 northern giant petrels, a threatened species, and precisely the kind of bird the poison was spread to save. The island was declared pest-free in 2014, and the seabirds have come back hard. That was the price, and somebody wrote it down, which is more than most of these operations can say. It did not finish cleanly either. The last rat of the 2019 operation was detected on the 9th of October that year. Then, in April 2021, 2 black rats were seen in the settlement. Genetic analysis established they were not stowaways off a new ship. They were descendants of animals that had survived the baiting. 95 more were removed over the following months, with detection dogs and handlers walking more than 2,100 kilometers. The peer-reviewed account of the settlement work estimates that about 16% of the rats there would not enter a bait station at all, roughly 280 animals that were never going to take poison out of a box, however many boxes you put down. In July 2023, a 2-week verification went over the whole island. 140 tracking tunnels, 300 wax tags and chew cards, 32 cameras, dogs, more than 950 device checks, nothing. New Zealand's Island Eradication Advisory Group signed it off, and Lord Howe was declared rodent-free. The $9.5 million budgeted in 2012 had become over $15 million, and biosecurity now runs at around $2 million a year, indefinitely. One animal is still outstanding on Lord Howe's ledger. The Lord Howe Island phasmid is a black, glossy, flightless insect about the length of a hand. The islanders called it the tree lobster. The rats ate it out of existence in the 1920s, and it was written off for 40 years. until climbers on Ball's Pyramid, a bare volcanic spike rising 600 meters out of the sea 20 kilometers away, found freshly dead remains in the 1960s, which told everybody the animal was there and nobody could reach it. In February 2001, a survey team climbed to a terrace 65 meters above the water and found 3 phasmids on a single Melaleuca shrub, 2 adults and a nymph, all female. They took none of them. They came back the following March and counted 24, and it was not until February 2003 that 4 animals were carried off the rock. 1 pair went to Melbourne Zoo, where by 2017 more than 14,000 nymphs had hatched from them. In March 2026, weed officers surveying Ball's Pyramid found 2 more colonies at locations nobody had checked and took 7 animals for breeding. Fewer than 50 are thought to be alive out there. The island board is now asking the residents how they would feel about bringing them home. Not to the settlement, to the mountains first, inside the park preserve where the odds are best. There is no date, but for the first time in a century, the island they were eaten off is an island that could hold them. Every living thing on Lord Howe today is downstream of one ship losing steerage on a June morning and a crew throwing bananas into the sea to get her off a rock. Nobody decided that. And every deliberate decision since. 100 owls, 130 tons of poison over 30 years, 47 tons in a single winter, 28 dead owls, 2,000 kilometers of walking behind a dog, has been an attempt to undo an accident that lasted about a week. The correction always costs more than the mistake, and it is always paid by different animals. There is a city that faced its rats immediately and did not wait 100 years. In 1902, a colonial government offered 1 cent for every rat tail brought to a municipal office, and on a single day in June that summer, 20,112 tails were laid on the counter. For now, thank you for coming out to the island with me. If you want more stories about the strange costs of trying to repair nature, subscribe to the channel.